Please be seated. Shabbat Shalom, friends. So many lovely friends here and at home. Wherever you found us, so glad you're with Congregation near Tamid this morning. I wanted especially today to share a teaching from the late and beloved Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks. It's hard not to bring Rabbi Sacks's teachings every single week because this giant of our time who left us almost 2 years ago in November said things in a way like nobody other. But I imagine it will be somewhat obvious why I especially wanted to bring in Rabbi Sacks today. In his extraordinary teachings on Parshat Ki Teitzei, in his series Covenant and Conversation, which I highly recommend, he gave us more than 30 books in his lifetime and more teachings than could possibly be counted. Each book of Covenant and Conversation is divided by parsha and then smaller essays for each parsha. And usually the challenge, if I sit and read him, is deciding which of the beautiful essays I like the most. And it's essentially impossible to choose. But I wanted to speak of his teaching that he calls letting go, based on this parsha. He begins by quoting Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and James Arthur Baldwin with these two statements. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. Hate multiplies hate, violence multiplies violence, toughness multiplies toughness, and on. In Dr. King's essays, Strength to Love. And from James Baldwin, he quotes, I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hatred so stubbornly is because they sense once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with their pain. In Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 8, toward the beginning of the Parsha, we were taught, do not hate an Edomite, the descendants of Esau, because he is your brother. Do not hate an Egyptian, because you are a stranger in his land. We are told, as we heard multiple times, even in the section that we read today, we were strangers in Egypt. We were held captive. How on earth could we not harbor some justifiable hatred? 40 years after the Israelites were released from Egypt, Moses speaks as though none of the embitterment had happened, none of the slavery, none of the centuries of hard labor. Moses speaks as if the Israelites owed the Egyptians a debt of gratitude for their hospitality. Yet he and the people were where they were in the wilderness only because they were escaping from Egyptian persecution. He didn't want the people to forget it. Obviously, we were told, and still are to this day, to recite the story every year at Passover, and we reenact it every single day. But what Rabbi Sacks teaches is, to be free, to be truly free, you have to let go of hate. You can't create a free society on the basis of hatred. Resentment, rage, humiliation, injustice, the desire to restore honor by inflicting injury on your former persecutors, those are the conditions of a profound lack of freedom. You have to live with the past, says Moses, with the past, but not in the past. And those who are held captive by anger against their former persecutors are still enslaved. Those who let their enemies define who they are have not yet achieved liberty. The only way that we can be truly free is to live in a state of compassion and love. As we were also taught in this parsha, give generously to the poor, let them eat the leftovers of the harvest, leave a corner of your field, share your blessings with others. The structure of biblical law is rooted in the experience of slavery in Egypt, as if to say, you know what it feels like to be persecuted. Do not persecute others. When we left Egypt, we were given, and this was prophesied much earlier, gifts from our former captors. We were given gold and silver and all manner of gifts as we left. And later, a little earlier in Deuteronomy, we are taught, when you release your slave, do not send him away empty-handed. Supply him liberally from your flock, your threshing floor, and your winepress. Give to him as God has blessed you. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and God redeemed you. And that is why I give you this command. That's Deuteronomy 15. When your Hebrew slave goes free in the 7th year, you must let him go, and don't send him away empty-handed. The expression, we have a few parting gifts for you, isn't just from the world of game shows. It's from the Torah. There cannot be justice in the fullest sense of the word when people are still enslaved. And hatred and liberty cannot coexist. I read to you from Rabbi Sachs. A free people does not hate its former enemies. If it does, it is not yet ready for freedom. To create a non-persecuting society out of people who have been persecuted, you have to break the chains of the past, rob memory of its sting, sublimate pain into constructive energy and the determination to build a different future. Freedom involves the abandonment of hate because hate is the abdication of freedom. It is the projection of our conflicts onto an external force whom we can then blame, but only at the cost of denying responsibility. That was Moses' message to those who were about to enter the promised land. Now, Amalek was a different case, but insofar as the Egyptians were concerned, a free society can be built only by people who accept the responsibility of freedom, subjects who refuse to see themselves as objects, people who define themselves by love of God, not hatred of the other. Do not hate an Egyptian because you are a stranger in his land, said Moses, meaning to be free, we have to let go. Rabbi Sachs's teachings are always so appropriate and deeply meaningful, but of course I wanted to bring him today to be spiritually in our midst because Rabbi Sachs was, of course, a friend of King Charles III and grew up, of course, revering and praying for Queen Elizabeth II. May she rest in peace. King Charles has gone through many stages and evolutions in his life, many chapters, and in a way it's been fascinating to watch him mature to a very mature man and finally take the throne of England. When Rabbi Sachs passed away, much too suddenly for all of us, 2 years ago, the king eulogized his friend as a light unto the nations, quoting Isaiah, at what was then, of course, a digital memorial at the end of the Shloshim period. King Charles, who noted that they were both born in the same year as the founding of the State of Israel, said he had come to value the rabbi's counsel immensely. He was a trusted guide, an inspired teacher, and a true and steadfast friend. I shall miss him more than words can say. The king said his sudden and unexpected death is an irreplaceable loss to the Jewish community, to this nation, and to the world, but most of all to his family, to whom he was utterly devoted. Through his writings, sermon, and broadcasts, Rabbi Sachs touched the lives of countless people with his unfailing wisdom, with his profound sanity, and with a moral conviction which, in a confused and confusing world, was all too rare. At a previous dinner to honor Lord Sachs on his retirement as chief rabbi, then Prince Charles recalled, I said, and I deliberately misquoted Isaiah, that he was a light unto this nation, and said I hoped he would keep that light burning for many years to come. That was only 7 years ago at the time, but in the years that he was given to us How brightly that light burned, how many lives were brightened, how many dark places were illuminated. He was, said King Charles, truly an or lagoyim, a light unto the nations. King Charles' words about Rabbi Sacks touched me deeply then and now, to consider these men from different religious traditions so close, such good friends. It gives me hope and was an extraordinary validation of the Jewish presence in Britain and in our world. So I'd like to close today with reading Rabbi Sacks's own words about the Queen, and just put a little bow on some of these musings today. This was delivered June 1st, 2012, in honor of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee. This is what Rabbi Sacks said on BBC Radio 4's Thought for the Day. I apologize that it won't sound as lovely as in Rabbi Sacks's beautiful British accent. Among my first memories, I was 4 at the time, was of Her Majesty becoming the Queen. My father went out to buy a television, a huge piece of furniture with a tiny screen, so that we could watch the coronation. In my first days at school, we were taught the national anthem, and I can remember thinking that the words, "long to reign over us," were about the weather, which was why England was so wet. She reigned, I thought, exceptionally well, and so she has in the true sense for 60 years. Jews are intensely loyal to the Queen. Every week in synagogue, we say a prayer for her and her family. Each time we see her in person, we say a special blessing, as is traditional in the presence of a monarch. And tomorrow we'll be saying a special prayer for the Diamond Jubilee. 2,000 years ago, the rabbis said, "Pray for the welfare of the monarch, for were it not for respect for him or her, people would eat one another alive." Strong words from the Talmud, but ones Jews and others feel in their very bones. My late father came here from Poland. My mother's family came from Lithuania. Had Britain not let them in, they would have died in the Holocaust, and I would have never been born. For us, Britain's tolerance and traditions of fairness aren't something we take for granted. They are the very things that allow us to live without fear, and they are embodied, personified in Her Majesty the Queen. For most of us, she's the face of national identity, the unifying presence at the heart of British life, to whom we feel loyalty whichever way we vote, and regardless of class, color, culture, or creed. It was intensely moving on Tuesday of this week in the House of Lords to hear Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, and Zoroastrian peers speak of how much she means to each of our communities, and we need that unifying presence all the more diverse we become. For 60 years, the Queen has spoken gently to the better angels of our nature. Hers has been the quiet heroism of service, the dignity of dedication to the common good, the good that's so much bigger and nobler than self-interest. She makes each of us a little better than we might otherwise have been. A 3rd century rabbi used to say, "Where you find greatness, there you find humility." And that has been Her Majesty's greatness. May God bless her, for she has truly blessed us. May the memory of Rabbi Sacks, of Queen Elizabeth II be forever a blessing, and may King Charles have good health and a long and peaceful reign. Shabbat Shalom.